The agriculture and forestry industry in Alberta is vital to the economic health of our province. Joining me now to discuss this today is Devin Dreeshen, Alberta Minister of Agriculture and Forestry. Now, first of all, Devin, can you explain how much the ag sector contributes to the Alberta economy?
Well, it's over $23 billion. It's the second largest sector in our province, so it's very important. And also, it covers so many different aspects of the province at every corner from the Peace region down to Lethbridge. It's so important to the rural areas here in the province.
Where are things at in China when it comes to the current ban on canola exports from Canada?
Well, ultimately, it's disappointing that Alberta farmers are having to pay the price for this diplomatic dispute. It's something that the federal government has been asleep at the switch, which is unfortunate when they see that, they haven't been able to resolve this. Just relationships between Canada and China have been getting worse. And it is something that, farmers at the end of the day are trying, they're wanting to, they grow amazing canola products. They want to be able to sell it to China and around the world. And there are other countries that are picking up our canola, and that is a positive, good thing. But at the end of the day, China's about 40% or was 40% of our canola exports. And to see that market disappear overnight has been a big issue for canola farmers in Alberta.
So outside of China, what are some of the other countries? At the United States? How about other countries in Asia?
The U.S. is the top actual exporter that we have, but there are other Asian countries that are starting to pick up, and grain companies in Canada are looking for other markets to sell, but it's more difficult. Those are more traditional soybean markets, so that they are selling at a depressed lower price, and at the end of the day, that just hurts farmers in the pocketbook.
Now, Devin, you are our agriculture minister, but you're also a farmer yourself, right? How's harvest season going so far?
Yeah, agriculture and forestry, but yeah, farming so far has been really good. The over the long weekend, we actually took some barley off, so that was my Labor Day weekend. But I farm near southeast of Pine Lake, and it's actually been a pretty good growing year so far. We haven't got tons of rain like they have in some areas, or drought, especially down in southern Alberta that farmers have been facing. So it's Alberta. It's always difficult, challenging weather, but for me personally, it's been a overall pretty good harvest.
Let's talk about China for just a moment again here, Devin. I hear that wheat farmers have been able to significantly increase exports to China because of the trade dispute with the United States. Can you comment on that?
Yeah, so about from this time last year, we're about 50% higher in our wheat sales to China. So that is a positive. It's a plus. Ultimately, at the end of the day, we haven't seen wheat prices climb to where farmers have seen it in the last few years. But overall, we have amazing grain companies here in Canada that sell globally because our farmers do such a great job of producing more than we could ever possibly consume here in Canada. So export, trade, market access, it's so important to the agriculture sector out in Western Canada. And that's why Alberta, we have trade offices around the world. And we actually had Minister Tanya Furr, our economic trade minister. She went on a trip to Japan and Korea, two important agriculture markets a couple months ago to promote trade and market access for our farmers. So it's something that this government, we understand the economics around our exports and the benefits that come with it. So we're very, very supportive of helping out that industry.
Now let's discuss the energy efficiency programs that were being offered to farmers to help with solar panels or upgrading irrigation and grain drying systems. That was being funded through the provincial carbon tax. So will these programs be stopped now?
So, well, one of the great things that our government, we campaigned on, and we're happy to eliminate the carbon tax. So whether that's natural gas that people see on their homes or just fueling up their gas tanks, it's something that they see that immediate benefit. But then that carbon tax, some of it was used to pay for these types of programs. And as a government, we're supportive of alternative uses or production of electricity or energy. But at the end of the day, we just don't believe that taxpayers should be subsidizing it.
Now, speaking of that carbon tax, now that Alberta acts the tax, although we'll have to wait till January if the Liberals get back in, it'll be back here with the federal tax. To what degree is this helping the financial burden in the agriculture sector now that Alberta doesn't have that carbon tax?
It's a huge benefit, and it's something that we heard. We didn't just dream it up. We heard from industry and farmers saying that They don't understand why there is a carbon tax. It's a regulatory, or it's an impediment for them on a competition side of, they compete around the world globally on their exports, and other countries around the world that they compete with, like the US even, they don't have a carbon tax. So it was an extra added cost to our industry. And so that's why we campaigned to get rid of it. So that has been a positive, a huge benefit to farmers, because they were paying lots in carbon tax. But it goes beyond just even the agriculture sector. There is just locally, my gas co-op collected about $2 million in carbon tax from ratepayers from around the area. So that's something that now we'll especially see in the winter, that that people aren't going to be having to pay for that carbon tax on the natural gas.
Let's chit-chat a bit now about the Farm Freedom and Safety Act, which will be replacing the controversial Bill 6. Devin, I understand one of the beefs farmers had was being forced to buy workplace insurance from WCB. They wanted to have the option of buying private insurance. Is that going to happen?
Yeah, well, that's something that we heard at every single stop. We had about 25 stops in total. There was about 8,000 kilometers that I put on the truck throughout the entire tour that happened this summer. And that was a unanimous thing that came up at every single stop was, farmers would come in and say, I've had private insurance and had it for years, and it covers my workers, whether they're off the job or they're on vacation or they're traveling. And it's timely, it pays out well, and it's something that we are going to keep. But with Bill 6 that the NDP, the previous government brought in, they were forced to go out and buy and pay WCB premiums. So they ended up paying two premiums when they had no intention of using WCB. So that I would see that would be in the upcoming legislation, to be able to remove that mandatory WCB coverage.
What about small farms? Are they going to be exempt from employment legislation? If so, what really qualifies as maybe a small farm?
Well, and that was, again, a big discussion that came up at the consultations was, how do you define a small farm? What is a small farm? What's a family farm? How far down the line do you go? And it did bring up a lot of questions of, why can't we kind of have a best management practice to be able to say, whether it's an environmental farm plan that lots of farms do, but even a workplace farm plan, to say, this is the type of work that we do. Let's educate, let's promote a culture of safety up front, rather than being prescriptive down the road of, this is what each farm should have to do. Because at the end of the day, every farm is different. There's so many different variations of the type of farms and type of agriculture that we have in the province. So to try to find a one-size-fits-all set of rules is next to impossible. And at the end of the day, it's not practical.
Now, another thing farmers wanted to change was to have less regulations and red tape. Are there some specific areas where you're going to do that?
Something that our government, we're almost obsessed with looking at red tape and trying to eliminate it. And it's not just reducing regulations or burdensome legislation that doesn't make sense, but it's also looking at compliance costs. So whether there be regulations that farmers have had to deal with, or applications to programs, whether it's AFSC, for example, we want to be able to streamline and make sure that there's better connectivity, there's a better service standard that farmers are receiving when they deal with the government of Alberta.
Where are the beef and pork industries at right now? What are some of the big challenges they're facing?
Well, they're also facing a China issue as well. They have China's banned, or they've not allowed exports of cattle and hog products. So that's been an issue, and they've revoked and removed some export licenses from some facilities even here in Alberta. So that's a big frustration and difficulty. But again, when it comes to livestock, the U.S. is our number one customer. And it was actually a little startling that there were some U.S. Democrats that were promoting bringing back COOL, a country of origin labeling, which at the end of the day is just a $1 billion+ red tape initiative that would have unnecessary labeling requirements of Canadian and American pork and beef. And at the end of the day, just hurts the industry. And it's something that on both sides, the common sense farmers would understand and say that, no, this is actually a bad idea. And it's something that we thought was actually eliminated a long time ago. But it is concerning to hear these, the ghost of COOL coming back and Democrats talking about it again. So hopefully that stays dead and buried.
What are your thoughts on the new NAFTA or the USMCA? Is that going to be helping Alberta farmers?
At the end of the day, it's, again, with the U.S. being our number one consumer and buyer of agriculture products, there's still that good free flow and free trade in a lot of aspects. So to me, on the agriculture side, there was no harm done. There wasn't new tariffs added. So that was a great thing. And also for sugar beets on that side, that market actually expanded a lot with the new NAFTA or the USMCA. So that overall, I think it should have been negotiated a lot differently. Lots of commentators were saying that Canada and the U.S. should have signed a bilateral agreement early on in the process, with having the U.S. wanting the change to it because of issues with labor standards and environmental standards from Mexico, and Canada wasn't an irritant to them. But at the end of the day, the U.S. and Mexico signed a deal, and then Canada was in a take it or leave it state at the end of the negotiation. So that was a tactical error, I believe, on the government of Canada part. But at the end of the day, for agriculture, the U.S. is our one and only neighbor, and they are our biggest customer.
That's why we're at the very end. It was the USMCA, it's like right at the very end there. Now, there are a number of climate change special interest groups that are now apparently trying to convince the public that eating beef is a bad thing for the environment. How do you respond to something like that?
I went to Twitter. I even had the Weather Network was complaining about it as well, saying that people need to eat less beef, and it's those types of nonsense and a false narrative that gets pushed out, that as a government we want to be able to work with industry to combat it in real time, and that's why we even campaigned on a fight back strategy for our energy sector as well as our agriculture and forestry sector. So that because there is a growing disconnect between urban and rural, between agriculture and city folk, of the fact that lots of people are moving to cities, and there's even just been generation detachments away from the rural way of life. And to me, that just grows that distance grows a greater possibility of industry groups coming in and spreading fear, misinformation about industry. So to me, that's something that we want to be able to work with industries to be able to tell the good news story that we have on the agriculture side, that we have amazing, whether it's modern agriculture techniques and crops, or within livestock, and how good it is for the sustainability of grasslands to have cattle grazing on it. So there's an amazing agriculture story to tell. We just have to make sure it's being told properly.
How are our forests doing right now? We often hear concerns that our forests are being cut down too fast, but there are also reforestation efforts underway. Does Alberta have more trees or less trees than we did, let's say, 20 years ago?
Well, after this is a very bad forest year, so about 800,000 hectares less that we have after this forest fire that happened up in northeastern Alberta.
Right.
But at the end of the day, our forest is old, and it is something that a true healthy forest is about 60 to 80 years old. And we have a lot of 100-plus-year forests that it's a dead, diseased, old forest, and it's a tinderbox waiting to burn. So we have to be able to work with our forestry companies in a joint management process of our public forests to make sure that we can harvest at a sustainable rate, and that we can actually have healthy forests that will have biodiversity and better for the environment, and at the end of the day be the natural good carbon sink that it could be. But we have to be able to log it properly, because at the end of the day, logging is good, and logging that leads to healthier, younger, better forests. So we have to, again, be able to promote that.
So where are we at right now when it comes to the softwood lumber dispute with the United States?
Well, there was a NAFTA panel that actually just ruled yesterday, which looked at the International Trade Commission ruling that there should not have been damages, or that there wasn't sufficient evidence to show that the U.S. industry is harmed by Canadian exports of softwood lumber. So that, unfortunately, the saga continues. But it is unfortunate that, as from a Canadian standpoint, that they didn't toss it out completely. But there's always another round with NAFTA or with softwood lumber, unfortunately. And so there is a WTO panel and another NAFTA panel that are coming up within the next few months. But it's something that, as a province of Alberta, we understand that there is no economic harm done to the U.S. lumber industry with exports coming in from Canada, and that's a position that we will defend strongly.
Are there any other markets for our wood that Alberta should pursue?
J grade wood that goes out to Japan is a very high quality, high priced market, and there are other areas, and trade diversification is important. It's just it's so difficult when we have the largest economy, a very large population right next door to be able to look abroad. But I think it is important to be able to have that diversification on exports, whether it's agriculture or forestry around the world, for sure.
Devin Dreeshen, Alberta Minister of Agriculture and Forestry, thanks for joining me today from Edmonton.
Thank you so much, Hal. I appreciate it. Thank you.